Alright, welcome to 3-2 transversals and parallel lines. This is a big part of geometry. Okay? Big part. And the reason why is because parallel lines give us special angle relationships within that transversal. Transversals and parallel lines. Boom. Okay. So we have, this is just kind of a base definition. If we have parallel lines, remember you're going to have little lines like that, show they're parallel. You've got a transversal. And you've got interior. Remember, interior is inside. If you've ever done painting before, you know there's a difference between interior paint and exterior paint. The reason for that is exterior has to hold up to weather. So this is our interior. And we have our exterior on the outside. Boom, exterior. Okay. So interior and exterior. Now, we're going to run through the same angle relationships yesterday, but now they're going to have a congruent or supplementary relationship. So pay close attention. Don't tune me out because you're like, oh, I know that. You know what the relationship is. But what the relationship really is, if it's congruent or supplementary, is going to be the new piece today. So alternate interior angles. In parallel lines. These are congruent. Remember, congruent, fancy word for equal. I got my parallel lines up in here. And alternate interiors. Alternate interiors. So those angles there would be alternate interior, and they are congruent. And my dotted angles would also be alternate interior. Another thing, these problems are very visual, as in, like, what you see is probably what you get. If you look at my two dotted angles, those guys are both obtuse. They're probably equal. And they are. My angles with the little congruent marking on them, they're both acute. They're probably equal. And they are. Okay, again, these are very visual. If you think two angles are congruent, they're probably congruent. Okay. Second piece is alternate exterior angles. Okay, alternate exterior angles. These guys are also going to be congruent in parallel lines. And again, very descriptive. Alternate, different sides of the transversal, exterior, outside. So, alternate exteriors would be here, they're outside your parallel lines and on different sides of the transversal, or right here. Again, here too, you can probably guess the relationship. The obtuse angles are going to be congruent and the acute angles are going to be congruent. Two more to go. We have corresponding angles next. pay attention to this one because these guys can be a little confusing. Not terrible, but again, just watch. Corresponding angles and parallel lines. These are congruent. So you'll notice all the relationships we've had up to now are going to be congruent. Okay? And keep in mind, corresponding are angles in the same spot relative to the transversal intersection. Okay. So here's your parallel lines. Angles in the same spot. So for example, angle 1 and angle 1. They're both top left in that intersection. They're also both acute. Hey, acute angles and parallel lines are going to be congruent. Angle 2 and angle 2. Top right. So we have top left here, top right, top right. Angle 3 would also be congruent to angle 3 down here. Those guys are corresponding because they're both bottom rights. And 4s would also be corresponding because they are bottom lefts. Okay? Again, these are angles in the same spot relative to the intersection. Relative to the intersection. They're both bottom lefts, those angle 4s are. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, man, everything's been congruent. Is anything not going to be congruent? Yes. This last guy's not congruent. These guys are called consecutive interiors. And consecutive interior angles are supplementary in parallel lines. And remember, supplementary means adds to 180 degrees. And how it looks on our lines is like so. Consecutive interiors. Boom. Those guys are right next to each other and they are inside the parallel lines. They are not equal. And use your eyes. They don't look equal. This guy's obtuse, that guy's acute. Again, parallel lines are very visual. And you've got two options for how angles are related. They're either congruent or they're supplementary with parallel lines. Well, if you know this is acute and this is obtuse, you know they're not going to be congruent. So the only other option is supplementary. These guys are also consecutive interiors. Again, one's bigger than 90, one's smaller than 90, so we know they have to be supplementary. Technically, if you were to like pick this angle up, like cut it out and put it here, it would form a straight line. Now, that's all there is for these new pieces, but keep in mind you're learning from back in chapter 1. You're still going to be using supplementary angles for angles that are next to each other. For example, you know these two angles I'm pointing to add to 180 because they form a straight line. Okay? You also know vertical angles. So these two angles I'm pointing to are going to be equal. Okay? And again, we know that because we learned that back in chapter 1. Vertical angles are congruent. Main deal. With parallel lines, if you can remember all the acute angles are congruent, all the obtuse angles are congruent, and any match of an obtuse angle with an acute angle is going to be supplementary. That's really the main relationships you have to know. Okay? All right, there you go. I'm going to do some examples now, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video.